pressure to do this episode with you guys. I was not going to be part of this episode, but I'm here now. Well, we're here with the heavy hitters, literally, figuratively. Welcome again, my brother Arnold. Finally, you're back. You're back.
It's been like 7 months, bro.
For a while. Zab, you're back again. My brother Isaiah, thank you for coming again.
Yes, sir.
When's the last time you came with us? The first time you came, do you remember?
The first time?
Yeah.
Ooh, a long time ago. 2 years ago, maybe?
Probably.
Easy.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for, how long have we been doing this?
For a minute.
Like 4 years now, right?
It's about to be 3.
3?
No, it's about to be 4 this year.
Wow. God is good.
Yeah.
That he still gives us an opportunity to speak in the mic.
Yeah.
Well, they're all looking at me now.
Some of us have that privilege.
Hey, man. You
Pero
do have a privilege.
por pura misericordia de Dios.
Yeah, I don't know how. God's good. We're here today, and every time we talk about it, what we want to talk about, it's like we sit at the table, and our main goal is to have a real, genuine conversation. And today, I think the conversation is the pressures that we face growing up. For those that don't know, we all come from pastoral families. All of our fathers are pastors. And it's a blessing, but sometimes when we're growing up, we don't see it that way.
Yeah.
And so
Not at all.
Most of the time, we don't see it that way. Yeah.
So it's one of those things that a lot of us, when we think about and we start thinking back in time and the things that we did when we were kids. I think, well, personally speaking, I'm the one that gave my dad the most headaches, and because I would be. I don't even know what the word to say here. It was one of those things that I would be the child that I always gave him the problems, I always gave him the troubles. But at the end of the day, I started figuring out my dad was a pastor when I was like 14 years old, 13, 14, because I didn't know what that was growing up. What's a pastor? And people would come to him and talk to him. But always learned this in church, and I don't know if y'all encountered this, and I'll let y'all speak, but it's like people expecting something from you because you're a pastor's son. How did y'all have to go through it? You know, starting with you, because you're the pastor's son, what was the main thing that you had to face?
Oh, yeah. Of course, growing up in a church, it's that expectation is always there from everyone. Mm-hmm. You know, everyone that you encounter, I think from birth, honestly. Yeah. You know, especially being the young man, it's like, oh, he's the next pastor. Or, you know, people have that expectation. Oh, he's going to follow in his father's footsteps. That weight is there, and especially, I get what you mean. You didn't really know your pastor was a pastor until you were 14. I'm kind of in the same boat. You know your dad goes to church, he preaches, he's with people, around people, but you really don't see the weight and severity of what that job entails until it kind of clicks. Mm-hmm. And it was the same for me. You know, growing up, I'm just another kid going to Sunday school. We're at church a lot, though.
A lot.
Probably more than
other
people.
kids don't have to come to church.
Yeah. You get to stay home when you're sick, not us.
Yeah, we're taking to the altar to be prayed for.
We're praying for you at the altar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they'll announce it from the pulpit, like, my son's sick. Will y'all pray for him? So it was a lot of pressure, but as a young kid, you know, you don't really know really what the job entails. And then once you hit that, I guess that mindset, like, oh man, my dad is a pastor. Mm-hmm. I gave my dad for a run for his money too. I was acting a fool around that high school time, and I always tried to keep it away from the church because I had that respect for it. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to bring that mess into the church, and it was always that level of respect towards that role. Mm-hmm. And people, you know, would say, "Hey, when are you gonna preach? Hey, when are you gonna, you know, do this? Hey, you know,
I need to repent first."
Yeah, I'm like, I gotta get right with God. I need a breakthrough first. So, I mean, and thank the Lord, you know, I followed the voice of God, and now I'm in a stage with my father, my pastor. I get to work in tandem with him, helping him, and I think that expectation has been kind of lifted. They know now the role that I play in the church. You know, he's pastor's son, but you know, he's the youth leader. You know, he does different things in the church. I don't feel that pressure as much you know, the older that I get, you know. But as a kid, you can feel it, I'm sure.
I mean, for me, I think I realized it was my dad was a pastor from an early age. Like I think it was the other way for me. I mean, I always saw him having to work, having to leave in the middle of certain meals and family meals, and you know, having him having to go attend something. You know, it made me develop a sort of resentment, you know, against the church and people. And when people would say, you know, because as pastors' kids, we always get that question: are you going to be a pastor like your dad? Are you going to be a preacher like your dad? I'd be like, no, I don't want to be treated like he was treated, you know?
Yeah.
That was my answer, always, straight up. And then, you know, there's a lot of pressures that come with that. But like you were saying, I always try to, you know, I always try to keep my life separate, basically, from the church. At the church, I was one thing, and I try to respect it. I try to be one thing, but everywhere else, I was, you know, I was completely different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, the role, I understood the severity of it, but I didn't want it.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want it. So it's for me, it was different, I guess. In that sense of, you know, I didn't, because kind of like you, when I was growing up, I was the one that would give the most headaches, I guess, because I was the oldest.
Okay.
You know, so it always and the only
Were you
child.
the ringleader? I was always the ringleader.
I was the behind the scenes ringleader, if that makes sense.
The puppet master.
Yeah.
And sure.
The preaching. Let's
Pulling
go
the strings,
outside
pulling
and
the
play,
strings.
right?
Yeah.
You know.
Man, if we talk about the stuff, oh my.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was for me.
Huh?
That's what it was for me. So, you know, it's not like I was the loud one. I was just the
Moves in silence.
yeah.
Moving in
Yeah.
silence.
You gotta be careful with those type of guys.
Yeah.
It's hard to identify him too because
Silence.
No, I think for me it was again from a young age, but it's a little bit different because my dad became a pastor when I was like 7, so I think he was figuring out the balance of how to be a pastor and then having to do
You were born into it.
Born into it, yeah.
you know
9.
yeah.
I was 9, I think.
I was
And I
one.
think there's a
Yeah.
so from whatever
yeah.
and it's interesting because even to this day pastors are still growing and developing, and during that time, I mean, he was learning the ministry, and it was probably the toughest time in church. And we came from a church where we were fairly comfortable to a church where it's all the struggles. It's just sometimes it was just our family, and then when the people who were coming in, again, it's that pressure of there's no drummer, has to be the pastor's kid. There's no this, has to be the pastor's kid. So yeah, and then I think one of the things I struggled a lot, and then it's becoming clear now that I'm older, but it was always that, do I want to be in church because my dad has always told me to be in church? Do I want to serve God because my dad wants me to serve God, or because all these people say I should serve God this way?
Yeah.
Or is it actually coming from within for my love of God, or is it me just trying to appease the people who are around me? And since I'm in the environment, I'm trying to just make it the best that I can. That was probably the thing I've learned the most of do I want to do this because I love God and because I legitimately, outside of my dad's ministry, outside of my dad's calling, I have a separate calling from God. Again, being able to hear the voice of God, how he's speaking to you and what he's calling you to do. And that's going to be separate from your father.
So basically, we weren't allowed to make our own decisions. Is that what did everybody have that type of upbringing? Like, this is how we're going to do it? Is kind of.
I think inadvertently. I think like with the routines of church, you know, we got responsibilities that we need to take care of at church. It's easy to fall into that routine, and then you start asking those questions as you get older. Like, wait, why are we even doing this?
Right.
You know, like, and why am I even doing this? Is it because I'm doing it to fulfill a responsibility to help my dad? or
Yeah,
am
and
I
that's
doing
what
it?
happens.
Yeah, or am I doing it because I love to do this? And I think for me, like that love didn't come until later on when I was growing up and involved in different things. You know, I found a love for bass because you know I love the instrument bass, and I thought, you know what, I could serve the Lord doing this, you know. And I feel like different pastors' kids, once they find that niche, like they find that ministry, they get really, really good at it, and they're able to be a blessing to the church in an even bigger, I guess, like make a bigger impact, whether it, as opposed to being involved in a lot of little things. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So that's kind of like my mindset, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and for the longest time, for me, it was like, well, I'm doing this because of my dad. You know, that's how I
Like to
felt.
please him.
Yeah.
Because I've heard kids say that. I'm a musician, or because it makes my dad happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had to.
But so that's a real thing.
Yeah. I mean, I learned to play piano just because he wanted me to. You know, I didn't want to, but he made me.
Yeah.
So it was like all these things I'm doing is because I want to, you know, I want him to look okay. I want him to look fine. You know, in high school, my thought process was, you know, I'll do all these things, I'll minister in the altar, whatever. I'll do whatever he asked me to, so my dad can look good in front of the church.
Is it more like for him to leave you alone or to look good in front of the church?
Both?
Or for people to leave him alone about you.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to be one of those PKs that the church could be like, oh, look at the pastor, his kids are lost.
Yeah, disorder and all that.
Yeah, I wanted him to have a good testimony there, but when I was 18, I'm gone.
Yeah. So it's more like a front.
Yeah.
It was a shadow campaign he was running. You know. So.
When did it change for you? When was that? When was that switch, or how did it happen?
Like switch from good to bad or bad? Because I was a good kid growing up. Growing up, and then I got bad.
Switch from the I'm doing this because of my dad, or into like this is how I love God, and this is what I'm gonna do now for myself.
When I came back, I was already a grown man. You know, when I came back, I wanted to serve God. You know, I wanted to. I understood. I experienced a lot of things in my life outside of God. I was like, I can't do this no more. So I came back. I was committed to serving the Lord. I was committed to doing what I needed to do to have a good life with the Lord. And I didn't come back because of the ministry or my dad's ministry. I came back to my dad's church because when I came back to my parents' church, I was like, you know what? That's probably going to be a good springboard for me to get back on my feet. And it was a great decision for me to go back to my parents. And it was an access point for me to get back on my feet. They helped me out. They counseled me. But over the course of time, I started seeing more and more like how my parents were right at the end of the day, you know, that the life outside of God is not, you know, the life we want. And then it's one of the things that really touched my heart is, you know, seeing my parents, how they still had the same passion.
Yeah.
You know, after many years, even though I left, and they always wanted me to help them, you know, in their ministry, but that didn't bother them. That didn't bother them from stopping serving the Lord.
Yeah.
And, you know, I admired that. I admired that because I don't know how the parents would feel if their kids would leave the house, you know, and knowing that they didn't teach them the wrong things, knowing that they didn't teach them how to live an ungodly life, and then they leave, and it must be demoralizing for a parent, you know, for your child to leave. I don't have children, and I was talking about that with my wife the other day. It was like, what would we do if that were to happen? You know, what would we do, and if that were to happen to us, how would we talk to our kids and we won't know until we're at that point. And our goal is for that not to happen. And that's the same thing that Zab is talking about, is that now it's I think the priority should be, we want our kids to experience God.
Yeah.
You know, not experience ministry. And that's where I think our parents, they were by trial and error. They were tried by fire. So we can see now certain things and how it was done in the past, and does that fly still today? Probably not, but it taught us a huge lesson.
Yep.
You know, and that's where I think that's the biggest thing, and I appreciate now that we're able to talk. We did a talk, like a panel with the PKs, and a lot of them are going through their struggles.
Yeah.
You could tell the kids that were there at that panel, the kids that were there, half of them didn't want to be there, because they were there because it was a seminar and their dads took them.
No, there's a lot of things that we
Yeah.
don't want to go to
Yeah, so-
growing up that we're just forced to.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's one of those things that over the course of time, I think I didn't develop a relationship with God, and I was just being part of their life. That's how it was for me, and that was also my downfall. So once that changed, and I learned my lesson, I was able to come back and experience my own relationship with God, and that's where I was able to be able to serve the Lord freely.
Did you see yourself taking like a role of leadership within the church?
Not immediately, even though people wanted me to, but I'll try to stay away.
Yeah.
It was like my dad was like, "Hey, I need you to help me with this," but I didn't want to, because again, with leadership comes responsibilities and also the criticism of what you're doing. More should be expected from you, and I think that's what a lot of PKs have a struggle with, is that more should be expected of them, but they don't understand why more should be expected from them.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, why should more be expected from me? Why don't they have the same requirements for everybody else? And then the answer is because you're not the pastor's son, you're not the pastor's daughter. And to me, that's not an answer.
Yeah.
That's more of a cop out. There should be a clear, defined role. And I think that's where nowadays, over the last 15 years, it's been like 10, 15 years, it's been worked on. What is a defined role of a PK?
Yeah.
I think there isn't one. They're still working on it, in my opinion. But it's something that now we're talking about it. We start analyzing what is a real clear defined role, but and now we're just like we're in this environment where something is expected of us, and if we do wrong, and then when we mess up, it's like the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of young people feel like almost betrayed. Like I'm doing something for the Lord, and then if I mess up, it's like, you should know better.
And
No,
not
I'm
only
still
that,
learning life.
Like they also attack the parents too.
Yeah.
Like
And that's the worst part about
pastor, like they start talking about your dad, your mom. They're not doing things right. I felt like that stuff hurt me more than them talking about me. Of course,
Exactly.
as a kid, you're gonna get upset when they talk about you, but then you start talking about my parents,
Yeah.
and these are the people that I've seen my parents sacrifice so much for. Sacrificing time from the family to be with you, and this is how you're talking about them because of me. I don't understand it, and those are some of the challenges I'm sure pastors' kids get bitter with.
Yeah,
Big time.
yeah, because they're always going to talk about your parents. We're going to start a coffee break, guys.
Yeah.
They're always going to talk about your parents, and they're going to be the ones that, and you know what? What's so crazy? It's the people that your parents, like you mentioned, that do most for, are the ones that,
Talk the most.
hide the label. We don't want to promote.
That's a nice colored drink right there.
This is the first time ever. First time for everything.
Grapefruit.
Just take the label off for now. We don't want to promote whoever that is. It's a great
Get
business here in
copyrighted.
town. He likes pink flavored drinks.
I think it's red. I think it's gonna show the camera is red. Jamie. Israel. Please.
You know what you be watching. Yeah. So, do y'all talk to other PKs and see what their struggles are?
Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard because
Do they not open up?
because you at first I kind of goes the same when you meet anyone. You kind of poke around. You're like, you kind of open up little by little, and then you don't want to open up about your stuff because you're not trying to come up like as the one that's having trouble. You don't want to be the weak one. And then the other person's doing the same thing. But I think eventually it's really helpful. But yeah, no, I think you kind of have to. They're probably the only ones who understand what it is, because I don't know if y'all have gone through this, but many times I was like, I'm not as spiritual as I should be. Considering, and that's not someone telling me from the outside. That's not my dad telling me you should be more spiritual, you should pray more. It was just like, man, I go to church. My dad's a pastor. I should be more spiritual. And then in your head, you're always like, man, I'm behind, or I should be here, I should be there. And sometimes we can play the part that we're here or there. But we know within ourselves, kind of like having that double life of like, yeah, I know myself. I don't have the spiritual life that people think I have. And then I think it's just being able to live just being able to live really for who you are and where you are spiritually. But it's hard again because of that pressure of being the pastor's kid. It's like you have to be at a certain place because of your age or because again your parents. And I think once you're able to live and really your spiritual life just grows organically through God, a real relationship, then you don't, the pressure of having to play a part is not there anymore because you're not playing a part. And when was it for you where you stopped kind of just pretending and living that double life, and then you're able to just be true to yourself, and really that was your relationship with God just showing through?
I was like 17, going to 18. It was a camp. I mentioned it here many times. It was a camp. It was like a switch flip. Just I realized, what am I doing with my life? Why am I acting like I have nothing to live for? Why am I acting like God's not real? Why am I acting like he can't move in my life? I guess I would put too much pressure on myself. One of those things being what you were saying, the whole, I'm not as spiritual as I should be. My dad's a pastor. I'm a pastor's kid. I should be here. I should be an example, because that slowly over time became a pressure that others would put on me, and then it slowly became my own pressure. At 17, that's when I realized, what am I doing with my life? I've seen God move so many times for me to say that he doesn't exist. I've seen him do many things in my life and my family's life for him to not exist, and it was a switch. It was like, man, I've been doing things for the wrong reason. And one of the things that you were mentioning was, as PKs, like you were talking about, that when you raise your children, it's like for them to have a relationship with God and not just do things to do it. Because I feel like, and you were talking about roles as well, I feel like the role of a PK has to be all around sometimes. If you don't find, like you were saying, your niche, what God has called you to do, then you're just gonna be used for everything, which is not a bad thing. You're a jack of all trades. In other words, you can do whatever needs to be done, but then you're doing it to cover, needs that others could do, and then you don't get to enjoy why, the reason why. And one of the things that I'm asked a lot now, especially as a pastor, like, what do I do with my kids? Regardless if it's a PK or not, what I do with my kids that are growing up in church, but they're getting cold, or they're serving, but they're not doing it for the right reasons. What is it? One of the main things that I always say is they need to have a relationship with God, and they need to encounter God. Yeah. They need to experience who He is. They need to experience His power. They need to have an experience like that's different than the experiences that they always see. They need to have something on their own.
Something has to happen to them.
Yeah. They need to have that encounter where now everything's different, where now they can see, I'm doing it for this reason. I'm doing it for God. I'm not doing it because I want to please my parents. I want to please others. I'm doing it for Him. And so, one of the biggest things is that you have to have your own encounter with Him. And that's only going to come whenever, and I see it now, and I'm grateful for the kids that I see growing up sometimes now that are being taught that way, love God, love God, love God, seek Him, have an encounter with Him. Why? Because, I'm not, talking about my parents at all, but, in the pressures of ministry, you have to be there helping in certain things, even as a kid. And so I don't think they did the wrong thing. It's just, in those pressures, you got to serve, you got to do this, you got to do that.
Because they needed the help.
They had a need that needed to be met.
Exactly. Yeah. And as their son, you're not going to be like, nah, I can't say no,
Yeah. My parents.
Yeah, exactly. And, somebody else doesn't want to do it. Okay, yeah, I'll do it, But in the middle of that, maybe one of the things that, and I know they pushed for it, they would pray for it, they wanted me to have an encounter with the Lord.
Right.
I probably didn't seek it as much as I should have. I didn't want it as much as I should have. But I think that's one of the biggest things. I think if you're raising a child, if you're raising your son, your daughter, and you're pushing them to love the Lord, to show them what it is to love the Lord, instead of pushing them to do things just because they're the pastor's kid or because they're growing up in church or because that's their responsibility or whatever. No, guide them to have an encounter with the Lord. I think that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah.
Because that's what made the difference for me.
Yeah.
Even if I was 17.
And I think we're coming from a point where we didn't want to do anything. We didn't want a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's your thing. That's not my thing. No, you didn't ask me if I wanted to be a pastor's son. And those are questions that PKs a lot of times do ask, and they're fair questions. Those are fair questions because your life is shaped by your upbringing. 100%. I believe that. And that's the upbringing they have, and their life will be changed forever. Like there's something about growing in a pastoral home that will change your life forever.
Yeah.
And in both ways. But it depends on the experience that you have in a person that you're dealing with. But one thing I do see a lot more now, and this, I know it's a tough subject, but it's like there's some that are very arrogant about it now.
Yeah.
That because they're pastors' kids, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if y'all ever went through that in your upbringing. Like you would walk in and nobody could tell you anything. Hermano, usted no me puede decir nada. Yo soy el hijo del pastor. You know. You know.
Yeah.
You know. I don't know if y'all went through that. And I think, but I think when you're young, it's maybe passable. But when you're old and you're still arrogant, I think that we need to have a little
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so.
I've seen pastor sons more so like throw their dad's name around.
Yeah.
Sometimes like my dad is this person. This is my church, and I'm like, okay, bro, like in the real world, that don't mean nothing.
Yeah.
And I think like the strength coming, I guess like the strength that comes from a pastor's kid realizing that they do have some type of pull within the church, influence, but still chooses to stay grounded and realize that we're really nothing.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very admirable. Where a pastor's son or daughter can look at themselves and say, you know what? Yes, I may be privileged and within the church and have the ability to hold certain roles and responsibilities, but I'm still like everyone else, just trying to make it to heaven or trying to get through this life. You know what I mean?
I think that's a huge pressure.
Yeah,
People don't realize that.
Yeah, and I think like growing up in a youth group too, everyone knowing that you're the pastor's kid or something like that. I mean, I've seen some pastor's kid, use it as a flex, and for me, I kind of took the other way around, or the other approach. Like I was more embarrassed because they would see me do certain things, and I'm like, man, like the pastor's kid's doing that, and it kind of make me draw distance and put up boundaries with everybody. But I have seen some pastors' kids kind of flex and like
they have bad attitudes, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care. I'll say it. There's some that have bad attitudes because they feel like, and that comes from that comes from we're not Activados right now on the screen. That comes from
HDMI 1,
we're
ARC,
HDMI
no
1,
signal.
we'll keep going. But I think that comes from that's a pressure because it could happen to all of us. It could happen to all of us. What happened?
Move the mouse, bro. It went to sleep. Yeah.
That could happen to any of us where we take this.
Wow.
This is
Wow.
You got it? Just move it. Okay.
All right.
You move, bro.
oh
We move. Okay, hold on. We're gonna have there we go.
There we go.
Okay, so this episode has been all kind of weird. This is the weirdest episode ever. But anyway, I think that
That's some behind the scenes right there. Yes, Yana.
people don't learn. A lot of young people haven't learned to stay grounded especially PKs. Some of them have not learned to stay grounded. That everything is not about them. Actually, and they haven't learned that, you know. And a lot of them learn too late. That at the end of the day, everybody's talking about you. Everybody sees what you're doing, and they're saying things about you. And if you don't care what they say about you, that's one thing. But there'll be a time in your life where you're gonna care what they say about you, what they see in you, because it's not about you. It's also your family. It's a pastoral family, so you start like caring about what they're saying. And you're like, I need to be careful, you know. And so that's a huge thing that we can't let it get to you too, you know. Especially when you never left church, unfortunately, I talked to a kid and he's like, man, I've never left church like you did, so I'm doing better already. I'm like, just praise the Lord.
Self-righteousness,
you know, stuff like
Drop
that.
names, bro. Drop names.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Shout 'em
So,
out.
and we got to
Shout
be
'em
careful,
out.
huh?
Shout them out.
We're gonna tag them. You know, so it's like, come on, man. You know, I understand your point. Like, you never left church, and I think that's a great testimony. But don't rub it in my face.
Yeah.
You know,
That's worse.
You know, so don't throw it at me, and because it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
It can happen to anybody, and just because you're a PK, you don't have stronger faith when you don't just automatically are born with Samson strength and everything.
No.
You already have it as soon as you're born, and este tiene la fe, este tiene la fuerza, este nadie lo va a vencer. This doesn't work that way. You know, we have to develop, and I think that if we don't develop the right way, that's why we see a lot of PKs. That's why I was talking to my wife. So many PKs that have left the Lord.
Yeah.
It's sad to see, and I'm blessed to be one that came back. But what do you tell a PK that feels like I'm special? You know?
I mean, la parábola del hijo pródigo.
Yeah.
It does talk about the son that left and came back, and dad received him, but then it talks about the son that had stayed. And he had a attitude of like, why are we doing all this for my brother? He left.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost pretty much the same thing that happened to you. Like they're like, hey, I'm not like you. I didn't leave. And that whole parable is talking about how that son is in the wrong.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. I would just point straight to that story, and I don't know what else my words I can say what the Bible's teaching there, but because it is tough. It is tough where you when you feel like you've done something good, you're like, I didn't leave, or I didn't make those big mistakes. I'm like, well, yeah, maybe you didn't make mistakes. No, you did. I mean, people just don't know about them. Because we all make mistakes. We all failed. We all felt like from God's grace, and we all need God's grace because of how we are as humans. But it's that arrogance, and it comes from different places. Especially, I mean, you start combining some of these things that pastors' kids tend to be good at as well. It's just like you're a pastor's kid, and then I mean, some of them are really good musicians, or some of them become good preachers, or some of them become good in all these other things. So then all these things that can tempt you into that arrogance, into that pride, just start calling your name, and you start like, man, not only am I a pastor's kid, not only have I never left church, but I'm also pretty good at music. I'm also pretty good at preaching. I'm also good at this and this. But it's God's example of just him being the most humble person when he was down here on earth, and we just have to follow his example when it comes to that, just lifting the collar and thinking I'm the best. It's the Bible leaves no room for that. And one thing I kind of want to go back to was there's a side of that arrogance, but there's just the side that Brother Say was just talking about, that he was embarrassed by it. When do you think that embarrassment from being like a pastor's kid, like I'm embarrassed about this, I'm embarrassed about that? Because I probably relate to that a little bit more than the arrogance side, where I was embarrassed many times of like, man, yeah, I can't joke around with my friends because I can't be saying
You like joking around.
I can't say the things they do because
Yeah.
then, as soon as I say it, like everyone says it, and then I say something, it's like, but you're the pastor's kid. Or someone did this in church, and then I did the same thing. And then why is it worse when I do it? Because because I'm the pastor's kid. So how did you navigate that, or when did that embarrassment just stop being there?
Sure. I think really, I really didn't get over it till college. Like,
Wow.
high school, I think it heightens because you're trying to be accepted. You're trying to fit in. You're trying to fit a mold or an idea of who you think you should be. And I think college, for me, it was kind of like a turning point in my life, because when I got to college, no one really cared who you were.
Yeah.
You know, you're just another kid going to college, trying to get a good education, and then even more so in the workforce. You know, I had a job, and no one cared who you were. As long as you do a good job, that's what we want from you. And I think allowing myself to make mistakes, getting to that point where I'm like, man, I'm tired of being embarrassed of who I am. Of course, granted, I don't want to be doing bad things in church and give people a reason to point fingers at me, but I don't want to be embarrassed of who I am, you know. And
I don't want to say that you're a pastor's son.
Yeah, you know, and like, you know, people would ask me like, you know, what does your dad do, or what do your parents do? Oh, my dad's a pastor. When I was younger, I don't know, it was just me, but I was embarrassed, bro. I'm like, my dad's a pastor.
Some type of leader.
My dad had 2 jobs. I would always talk about the other one.
Yeah,
Not the pastor one.
exactly. My dad had a construction business at the time, and I'm like, oh, he's a construction manager.
Yeah.
I'd always name that one because for some reason it just felt like it was looked down upon or something. And now, like I say it with pride, like, oh, my dad's a pastor.
Yep.
And they're like, wow, that's awesome, you know. And I think realizing, allowing yourself to breathe, allowing yourself to make mistakes, because at the end of the day, like you said, we're all human. You know, just because we have a certain title that other people don't hold doesn't make us any different. We still have the same Holy Ghost that they have.
Correct.
We still have the same flesh that they have. And if we allow ourselves to make mistakes, repentance is for everyone. Change and salvation is for everyone. And I'm a big believer, like, we have to allow our pastors' kids to make mistakes, because I'd rather them make mistakes in the church and help them, pick them up, put them back on their feet and love them, than them run from church and never return and
it's so hard
completely
for them to
lost.
return.
Yeah, and I feel, you know, if you know, pastors' kids, if they can feel like they can make a mistake in church, because mistakes are never a mistake until they're a mistake. You know, if we allow them to make that mistake in the church, you know, that's the best place to make them, because that's what the church is there. It's to love and to pick people up. And I think when I realized what the whole purpose of the church should be, and of course my dad was great. You know, he knew what he had. he knew what he had, but he always told me, like, look, son, whatever you do, don't stop coming. Whatever you do, the church is here. I'm here. You need to talk to someone. I'm here. And I think giving myself that room to make mistakes within the church and not have that pressure on me made the difference. But of course, as a kid, you don't really think through those things, you know. So
Yeah. And the tough thing, like, I think Arnold, when he went to college, you started, like, you was running away, you know, at that point. And
That was actually not running away.
What were you doing?
That was actually the last option I had.
The last option.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had my plan before that.
Yeah.
That was
running away. That was like, okay, that didn't work. This is what I'm gonna do.
That was when it clicked for me. I was like, oh wait, no, that's my escape plan.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna do something different now.
Do you think the independence? I think from what I'm hearing is, and this is personal, I think when we became independent, it released a lot of pressure.
I think so.
It's like I'm making my own decisions now. You know, I wasn't living under my father. Till you got married, you were still with your parents, right?
No, I lived by myself for a year and a half.
Year and a half. You still lived with your parents till you went to school, and you came back and you stayed with your parents. But I think that independence eliminates a lot of pressures.
Correct.
So when you were independent, did that cross come, like when you were you were going to a church, and I remember over there in Nacogdoches, like they knew you were a pastor's son, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did they treat you differently because of that, or because he was at a different church?
Yeah.
But it was not his dad was not the pastor of the church. He was in college.
Yeah.
So how was that experience?
Yeah, how was that dynamic? Like just sitting in the pew, you know?
Yeah, that's not what happened, bro. I wish.
Yeah.
I wish.
Oh, este
it
viene
had-
con experiencia.
I wish it had been, sitting in the church pew.
Yeah.
Do what I do at our church. Like, you got a waiting period. Before you can participate. And no, bro. Like, yeah, I'll just say it now. First service, I get there. Oh, you're a musician.
Get up there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It was like that. Oh, you play this, yeah. But I want to hear how y'all, what's y'all style. I want to know and get integrated to the church. Come up here, come practice. No, I'm okay. Come on.
He wanted a period of rest.
Yeah,
He wanted his Sabbath.
that's not that didn't happen at all.
Sight. Get up there.
I would have loved to sit there at the pews
Yeah.
in the pews, but it didn't happen. It just came. You're this. Oh, okay, well, come on up here, and practice with us, play with us. And that first service, I was already playing. First service there, and then eventually they would invite me to play at some events they were playing that they got invited. And it was like, for me, it was. Now I kind of like I was doing it more for the right reasons than before. Before it was to fill a need, and even though I was filling a need there, because they wanted a piano player, that they needed one, but even though I was filling a need, it wasn't with the thought process of, I'm just doing this because it's my dad or because it's because I'm being asked to. It was more for, hey, I'm willing to serve wherever y'all want me to serve. They even asked me to give Sunday school one day, and I was like, you know what, I'm down to give it, to the teens, and it was a different mindset at that point. I think for me, that moment, like I said earlier, was 17 years old in that camp. It was complete switch. That weekend, I had gone to that camp as thinking this way, thinking, doing it for the wrong reasons, being embarrassed, of my dad. He was working at a funeral home. That's what I would say he did. And he was in a pasture. That's not what I would say. It was all that, having the wrong friendships, all those things, being embarrassed to say I was a pastor's kid at school, all those things. It was, I came back Monday and it was completely different me. It was, I had friends that, hey man, what happened? You look different. Something's different with you. Something wrong? Nah, man. I went to camp and changed my life, and I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I went up to a friend, which is crazy. I've said it before. He was Trinitarian, but he would always carry his Bible. He would always be there with. He would pray before eating. He would pray before everything. And me over there, I'm be like, looking down on him.
What a weirdo.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotta learn how to pray.
Yeah,
pray
what is he
pray
doing?
in secret.
Yeah, and so that was me. When I came back that Monday, I went up to him. When I saw him, I was like, "Hey, man, I went to camp, life changed. I'm different. Thank you for being an example," because he had been, and it was completely different. It was now I'm not the pastor's son. Now I'm the pastor's son, but I'm doing it for the right reasons. That's where it happened for me. And then going to college just solidified that.
Yeah.
Because I was out on my own, like you were saying.
Yeah, and I think the independence does create an opportunity to you to define yourself. And I was thinking about this the other day. I didn't know we were going to talk about this today. And I was thinking about it, and now that we're talking about it, it comes to mind. I think a lot of PKs that have left church, they don't want to come back because of what's expected from them when they come back. And I don't know you understand what I mean by that, but it's like if you're gonna come back, it's like you gotta get back on a roller coaster immediately. Yeah. You gotta get back with the program, and I think a lot of them don't want to do that.
I think that's a lot of especially young people that have left.
Yeah.
Not just speakeasy in general. I know several that are just, they want to change. They mention it.
Yeah.
I want to change. I want to be different. But they have this thought.
You think it's resentment a little bit?
In a way, but I think it's more that pressure.
Yeah.
They think they've associated, because that's how they grew up with, because we can say we grew up with these pressures, but maybe that's how they grew up with pressures too in their home. And so they think that the moment they come back to church, they have that pressure to change automatically. And it's like, no, like, come back, just keep coming. Like your dad would say, just keep coming.
Yeah.
Just keep coming to church. Leave the rest up to God.
And I think that has a lot to do with like church culture as a whole.
Yeah.
It's like we want the best production, we want the best media, we want the best music, and like I think a lot of young people in general put that pressure on themselves. Like, man, like I'm not right with God. Not to say you should be living a double life while ministering, but they've literally eliminated themselves from even being used by God because they feel like they can't live up to that expectation, and it's just not true. Like, I mean, my pastor's always told us, like, if you're not right in the heart, like, I can take 3-6 months with bad music because I want to make sure you're fixed first. I don't need a piano player that's battling with depression and hurting, putting up a face, no, sit down, take a break, get right with God before you leave and feeling like you can't come back to meet that expectation. It's like, as church culture as a whole, like, I think we need to show some grace and again, give people room to make mistakes. We're human, And now if it's consistent and if that keeps happening, like, hey, you need to get set down, brother. There's some deeper issues there. But like, if it's a mistake and there's genuine fruits of repentance, like, come back. You can get back to where you were. So I think just church culture as a whole, it's
Agreed.
Yeah.
And that's tough because I remember when I came back and I started hearing songs that I never heard before. It's like, was I gone that long?
And I just want to say for the record, yes.
And I was like, man, that's a beautiful song. Yeah, it came out 5 years ago. It's like, I've never heard it.
Yeah.
That's when you're like, okay, I missed out on a lot.
Yeah.
I missed out on a lot. And I've always thought about that. What if we just let them come back? We want them to come back. But don't put anything on their plate.
Yeah.
Let them encounter God.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that pressure. Don't make them feel like they need to catch up. Like, hey, you haven't been here for 2 years. You got to make up for the 2 years that you were. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Like, having that church culture of, like, I mean, the Bible is a redemption story.
Yes.
About how we're getting redeemed, and then it should show. It should show with how we receive people who come back and who have left, and we're not like, hey, come back because of your usefulness to the church. It's like, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is your salvation. And we should extend that out to the pastors, and like you mentioned, all these people that have left, all these young people that have left, and think like, oh, I need to be this before I can go back to church. Like, no, just come back.
Yeah.
Return home.
Yeah, especially I think in the church culture that you're mentioning, it's like we expect that when people come back, that they need to be saved already. They need to be changed already. They need to that first service. Oh, praise God for that. They need to that moment. They need
Hermano,
to.
va a dirigir usted mañana.
Yeah, you better cry that first service. You need to let go of everything.
Yeah.
No, it's sometimes it's a process too.
Yeah.
It's like we're the most impatient. Like the church is very impatient.
Yeah.
Because I think it comes from because we know what God can do.
Yeah.
And it's like, if they only allow themselves to let God, let God do what he needs to do. But sometimes they're struggling.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's processes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody goes through that. Everybody goes through that, what they call emotional roller coaster. And especially in church, because they start remembering whenever I did come to church, all this happened. I remember when this happened. As soon as they're walking through the door. And especially if it's a church that they grew up in, and emotionally they're going through it before they even sat down, and then from the altar, like, bienvenido, this is your home. I'm like, it's like, just let them be, because sometimes at the end of the day, You know, we think we know why they're going through struggles, but we don't know.
No.
And but now there's something in them that's telling them to come back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they need something.
Yep.
Right.
And we can't be the ones that are gonna put pressure on them now.
Yeah.
And that's where we're talking about the subject, and a lot of things are going through my mind right now. You know, and a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I'm
Filter
like,
them, filter them.
yeah, and just get to the point. But how are we putting pressure on people?
I think inadvertently. I think again, like we want to do the best in everything for the Lord, of course. But of course, at the end of the day, it's ministry.
Right.
It's serving, and sometimes people can't meet that expectation every single time, every single Sunday, every single midweek. People are human. You know, it's a lot of churches. A lot of ministries, they're not getting paid for certain things, and you got to meet them where they are. Like, okay, as long as you're okay and as long as you're doing your best for God, then yes, I'll take it. I'll take whatever you can give the Lord. You know, not to me, not to social media or to fill some type of role. Like, just give me what you want to give to the Lord, because that's all that matters. You know, if you can give a ministry here, give a ministry there, that's all that matters. And I think social media has really done damage to the church because of that. You know, we want to, I mean, competition starts coming out, and I want to be like this church, and I want to do this, what this church is doing. And the fact of the matter is, you don't have those resources in your own church. Exactly. And then you start putting pressure on people around you. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to be better at this. But at the end of the day,
graphic designer.
Yeah.
You guys been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah. Like, man, brother, haven't missed a Sunday.
Why are you looking at him?
Next question.
No. But that's so true. That's so true. It's like, what's our approach with the people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because we come from the environment, okay, this was expected of us. Now we expect that.
Yeah.
And we got to be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I remember when like that whole process happened for me. It was like, okay, you know, I get it now. You know, this is what's expected of me, right? So then I kind of put that pressure on others.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, okay, now I'm doing my best. Now I'm living for the Lord. Now I'm giving it my all. You better keep up with me.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
No, you have to unlearn some things. I remember some things where I came up with the music ministry. I mean, the way some of the people would talk to us, like they were like, the hand gestures are just like how brash they were when they would talk to you and try to correct what you're doing. Yeah. I'm still trying to learn it as I'm working with like younger musicians that are coming up, and it's like, man, it's just I'm teaching them how I learn, but I didn't like the way I learned.
Yeah.
So I'm having to change.
Yeah.
I'm having to change. I'm trying to do better. Any of the musicians are looking. I'm trying to do better.
Watch him, bro.
That's why I have different teachers now.
Yeah.
I don't give the classes.
It's just the way we learn, and sometimes, and I remember even some like the older youth that was like the people who should be the more mature. At least when I was younger, I was like, man, a lot of them didn't say it in church, and then and it's like, well, I remember how they would act, and that was kind of the behaviors I learned in church and how I was, and I was like, I shouldn't still imitate that. Those people are not in church. I still shouldn't do that with the younger people, because I remember when I was young and they were the older guys in youth, I didn't really like how they treated me. And then having to and then being able to, again, that's part of like changing the church culture of man, how's the youth going to be? How is the music going to be now that I think all of us have had it, where now we have a bit more say and a bit more influence. Now we're not part of like receiving these pressures. Now we're the ones applying the pressure.
Yeah.
And how we're gonna do that? How are we gonna treat the people? How are we gonna treat people in ministry? How are we gonna treat people that we're working with? You're working with the youth. How do you treat your youth and try to work with those people that have left? And have you had some of those cases where they've left, now they're coming back?
Oh yeah, like I was just talking with a young man last week. You know, he left. He was involved in like 3 different ministries in our church, and I mean, great young man, awesome, and broken home. Comes from a broken home, and it's the holiday season, month of November, December. He went AWOL, stopped coming, wouldn't answer texts. I see him at a service, our New Year's service, and I saw him. I hugged on him. I loved on him. I said, "Hey, man, I'm just glad you're here." And it was just kind of like he saw a ghost. He started weeping, and I texted him here and there. Now, I said, my goal is not to get him back into ministry. My goal is to make sure his soul is saved. First and foremost. Like, that's what's more important than anything else. Because, again, if we got to sacrifice media or the lyrics a Sunday, that's fine. And this kid is on the verge of walking away.
Crying for help.
Yeah, and I love on him, and he's coming back to church. I feel like just church mentality or church culture. It's like we've gotten to a place where we want the best of every single thing, and it's just not. It's not realistic. It's not reality. Young people are going to make mistakes. Young people are going to fail, and we have to meet them where they are, because at 17, like you said, at 17, 16 years old, the mistakes that I was making, I wish someone would have said, "Hey, it's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. We're going to be okay. You're going to make it." Not having to jump right back in, just saying, "Hey, Isaiah, it's okay. Take a breath, get back on your feet, and keep moving forward."
That's something we never had. We never had that.
Yeah.
None of us. I don't think, because we were the pastor's sons, and so we got the best mentor in house, they would say.
Yeah.
So if he can't mentor them, what am I going to do?
They're doomed.
For real.
Yeah.
I'm like, so nobody ever put me aside, aconsejarlo, because like, you're the pastor's son. You get the counsel. Yeah. And we did. Yeah. One way or another.
I mean, speaking of pressures.
Yeah.
That was one of my pressures, Like you were saying, like, I think one of the things that, we see, okay, I don't want to be like that, if I'm ever in that position. But it's like, I catch myself sometimes being that way that I didn't want to be, that maybe my dad was tough, and I didn't want to be tough. I didn't want to be like that tough on something, and now I find myself doing it. I'm like,
yeah, I had to learn to stay calm in certain situations. Yeah, because we would, in a pastoral home, you find out about things, and this brother said this, and that. And then he's over there talking about amémonos de todo corazón. Let's love each other, forgive each other. And he's preaching about forgiveness and love, and I'm like, and you got to hold yourself down, like, you hypocrite.
Yeah, get off that mic, brother.
Yeah,
sit yourself down.
It's like,
yeah. No, a lot of pastor kids become very senile, like where you're like, okay,
this guy,
this guy,
yeah. Yeah, I can.
You can relate to that.
Oh yeah,
it's because you have access to information like that no one else knows. And you're like, man, this dude's a joke. Like,
you gotta keep doing. You can't say anything either. You gotta keep quiet. You know.
I'd be.
Then you get in trouble.
Give them a nudge.
Like, why did you say something?
The brothers and the sisters. Let's give the sisters some credit too. I'm like, she's crying. All right. Like, what happened?
You're right.
Yeah. Like, okay.
I love you, Pastor.
Sure you do, buddy.
Yeah.
Not what you said last week.
Yeah.
No, and I think at the end of the day, to kind of finish up, I know the battery's running out over here on the cameras.
We're actually good for like 30, 40 minutes.
Oh, we good?
Yeah.
Oh, we can keep going? Okay. I think we're having a great conversation. Yeah. One of the things I think we need to, one of the things when it talks about pressure, we need to embrace it now that we're older. But what do we do with what we've learned? And that's the key, because we can't have this this knowledge and experience and not use it.
Yeah.
What do we do? So I think that's the biggest key. Is like, I think everybody wants to do something, but it's like there's a fear there. Like, you don't want to step on nobody's toes. You don't want to. Like, if there's a young kid, for example, is 14 years old, you don't want to mentor that kid because, or you don't want to put or give that kid information that their parents maybe don't want them to know about. So you got to be very careful. It's like, I can't go to a 14-year-old and say I left church when I was 14. Like, I wouldn't want, but the parent don't want to hear that. So it's a different type. Now we got to turn this into a mentorship status. Where like now we need to figure out a way to get close to these kids and help them out, and not put expectations and that's where all of this comes from. Expectations that is given to them, and in order to fulfill something, they have to be this way. And if that can be eliminated to a certain extent, and we can mentor somebody to not feel that burden of the expectation, because at that age they shouldn't have that expectation. I think expectation should be to the person that wants it, that wants that responsibility, not that something that's boom given to you. And like one of the things that I love about the Bible is that the King Hosea, he was young, but he had mentors because they knew that he couldn't be king. And I think we need, if God has put us here and God has given us, I think all of us, an opportunity to serve in different ministries, I think that's a ministry that we should like embrace. And what can we do to help out? And I've always thought of that, because these kids do go through, it's a pressure cooker. And it's not just on Sundays. It's every day. Every day from the moment they start. I mean, I've seen videos of kids playing drums at 3 years old already. He's the future drummer of the church.
And I think another thing that Isaiah mentioned was the social media. Like before, like on Monday, you didn't have church on Monday. You didn't have a service. You can kind of like wind down. But it's like Monday, you're on Instagram, and I mean, we follow other churches. We follow other people within church because we're good brothers and sisters. But then it's like you never escape it. You're always like seeing okay, and then the comparison starts, or the. Or
I think a comparison of the other preacher, of another pastor.
Yeah, don't
that's
even get me started on that, man. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, well, we just opened it, so
I hate that, man. I hate that. Like, don't ever compare your pastor to anybody or any other preacher. That's just don't ever. That's a slippery slope.
Yeah,
slippery slope.
No. Now I want to talk on that too as well. Just
we're talking about pressure.
That's
pressure.
Why can my dad preach like that?
Yeah.
Did y'all ever think that when y'all were growing up?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Are
we admitting that?
No, I never was. I only saw other preachers when we invited evangelists over or at a convention.
Yeah.
Now it's like
it's different. It's completely different.
Press play on anything.
Yep.
And that's my favorite preacher. I'm like, who's your favorite preacher? It's not your pastor.
Hold on. What?
No.
Yeah.
No, but that's very true. As I was saying, is like you start comparing what this church did, what this church did. Something you mentioned earlier, and when you mean the resources, I think the main resource is the mentor, because it's not about the things that you have or the equipment, the tools that you have, but it's about who's helping you develop.
Yeah.
And I think that's us, the leaders.
For sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that you when you're on, like you said, on Mondays trying to check out stuff, and I've seen that stuff, man. That was a great service. I wasn't a part of it. I was not a part of that. So, no, but it's a guess in the fueste. What happened?
He has to go.
He has to go?
Yeah.
Oh, he had a call. No, but one thing, how do you counsel somebody that's trying, their church is growing, is developing? Because you grew up in a small church, right? Like
it was smaller.
Y'all had to build it up. Now I don't consider it a small church. Yeah. Praise God for that. But how do you, like, when you're going through that process, what is it that you would counsel a young PK? When they have to do a lot of the stuff in church, or they're always seen, because everybody sees them. What do you count? Like, ¿qué consejo le das? Like, what do you give? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the same thing that I do with any young person is like, I would just ask questions like, hey, what are you involved in?
Yeah.
And they start naming like 10 things. I do this. I open up. I close. I clean. I play. I sing. I'm like, man. So first, I try to like diagnose like where are they involved or are they not involved? Because if they're not involved and they hate church, and that's a whole nother issue. But like when I see a PK that's just involved in everything, I just want to know, like, how are you? How are you doing? How's your mind? How's your heart? What's going on at home?
Do you meet a lot of frustrated PKs?
Oh yeah. I've met many PKs where they're frustrated. they're one thing that honestly that I've seen that's going around in a lot of smaller churches is they're frustrated that their church isn't growing. And they get really discouraged. Like, man, my church isn't growing. We're not seeing, the fruits of our labor. We're not seeing our pastors respected, whatever the case may be. And I just try to encourage them. Like, look, if it's 2 or 3 gather in His name, He's in the midst. Just don't focus on the numbers. Don't focus on keep your motives pure. And whatever the case may be, if they're too involved, I just want to make sure the person is okay. The PK, the kid, not the title, but the kid, the young man, the young boy. What's going on with you. And I just try to help them navigate any frustrations that they may have. Whether it be in the ministry or outside in real life, and I just try to help them be a voice and have that open door. And I think that's what a lot of kids just need, is just someone they feel comfortable that they can call and text, whenever they're going through it. And I just try to be that person.
Are you getting a lot of? Are you connecting a lot recently? Like, is this something that over the course of time is the demand has become bigger, or is it about the same?
I think, of course, the more people that I meet, I've gotten opportunities to go preach out at different churches and meeting the pastor's sons. There at those churches, I've been able to connect with them, and of course, some are a little bit more hesitant than others. But the ones that do allow me to help them, I've gotten into contact with a lot of pastors' kids this past year, and gotten to connect with some. Just like one testimony, a young boy, he was playing guitar at his father's church, and I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he was the pastor's son, and I went and prayed with him, and I encouraged him, and after the service, he came to me and he said, Brother Isaiah, I was literally going to pack my bags and leave. I was going to run away, wasn't going to look back. And, I just needed someone to reach for me. And I feel like pastors' kids, they're always the one ministering. They're always the one trying to be the example. They just need someone to reach for them, and that's what I try to do.
Minister to them.
Yeah. Minister to PK.
Yeah.
So,
What about you? You've been encountering a lot of PKs, or you think that they're more younger now?
I do think they're younger, but I do think they always need, because I think about it from my perspective, from my life, from my teen years. I always wanted somebody to be there as a you could say an older brother, mentor, that sort of sense, and I did have we a lot of my generation, the generation right after, had that. Shout out David Quintero for that, because he was that guy. He was that guy with us. He was one of those that, he had the title of national youth president or whatever, but man, he would come down to talk to us, to shake our hands, to talk to say what's up, how are you doing, those things. And so, I think about how that helped me. How can I be that to somebody else? Maybe this is a different time or something. I'm not trying to compare myself to him, because my goodness, he's something else, right. But that helped me. How can I maybe
Do
use
the same thing he did
for somebody else?
Yeah.
And I encounter that, man. I see there are so many things that I've been seeing lately, and dealing with PKs. I just got back from an international trip about almost a month ago, like 3 weeks ago, and there, the need there for some of the PKs that I met, man, it's I was able to talk to them a little bit, on the side, hey, keep it up, kind of pour my heart into them, don't do this just because your dad is this, don't do this because your dad is that, you need to learn to love God. Excellent musicians, man, like some of the best. I'm like, man, I wish I had learned like that, But I'm like, that's great and all. And I told him, God's not looking for musicians. That's not what the Bible says. He's looking for worshipers. And I was like, and what's the difference? Is musician, anybody can be a musician. Anybody can learn to be a musician. Anybody can be a professional musician. But if he's not a worshiper, he's not going to touch God's heart.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to do that is if you know why you're doing this.
Yeah.
And so I was able to talk to them and, see different needs. There's so many needs right now. Any young person that needs that, I'm trying to encourage them, trying to guide them, trying to be different than how I was taught, which is tough for me because for me, it was, you're either going to follow the Lord or you're not. It was just straight up, just black and white, you know, and that's how I am. It's very tough for me to go outside of that, but I have to figure out a way, not just with the young people, but pastoring a church. You got to figure out all sorts of ways to reach people. And so, how do we do that? It's just figuring out what the needs are of each person, I think. And I think that's one of the things that you were mentioning, how are they, and when I hear that some PKs are doing this and that and this and that and a lot, and, maybe their church is not so small where there's nobody else anymore. I'm like, have you trained somebody? Are you showing somebody? Because then one of the mistakes we make as PKs in that sense, or as somebody so involved in in so many ministries, is that, oh no, we're the only ones that can do it. We're the only ones that can handle this. We're the only ones that do it right. If I let somebody else do it, they're gonna mess it up. And so then we get into that where then we don't allow anybody else to grow. And then if we don't allow anybody else to grow, then our church is not going to grow. The ministry is not going to grow. Nobody else is going to develop because we're doing it all. And I understand sometimes, maybe since we learned how to do things, we're so well versed in it that we do things right. But at the end of the day, it's not about doing things right. At the end of the day, it's about developing others. It's about how the Bible talks about discipling others. So maybe that's a way that you can disciple others and help them in their growing and their serving the Lord and their ministry with the Lord, and also in growing with their relationship with the Lord.
And that's something that's a big key for everything. I think that very little is talked about embracing where you're at right now, or embracing the opportunity to learn. I know now it's been like, hey, it's a blessing to be part of a pastoral home. Little by little, it's like it's been being embraced more, and but one of the things I always say, and we're gonna finish with this, is that to me, everything now that I'm older it was a learning experience. Learning experience.
Great.
And how am I gonna take it from now? How am I gonna take it from here? Especially with my kids, Lord willing. Especially when I pastor a church, Lord willing. What am I going to do? And I think that's the biggest key to all of this, is what are we going to do with what God has given us, the information that He has given us, the what we've learned. And I think we need to. Me personally, I think that's going to define if everything that I went through, is going to be put to good use. Somebody told me one day, imagine where you would be if you hadn't left church. And I said, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So at the end of the day, God knows everything.
Of course.
And He knows He has intentions for all of us. And I really believe that. And these kids have to believe that. And if they believe it and they want to live by that purpose, that's where you see kids like that. Man, they're amazing. God is using them at young ages. They're just, my Lord. But that's their time. That's their moment. So
exactly.
And so I'm very grateful that you're here with us, Isaiah. And,
thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you could have had a day off with your wife today and had some fun but I think when you're talking about the things of the Lord, and everything that we've learned and we're going to continue to learn, man, it's a beautiful thing.
Yes, sir.
It is.
Sure.
And
thank y'all for having me.
yeah, it's a blessing to have you here. It's a blessing to serve the Lord.
Amen.
It's a blessing to be part of the kingdom of the God. And my brother Arnold, maybe you could show up every once in a while, a little more often. you know, so you can do more episodes, you know.
I'm limited edition, bro.
Show up a little bit more. But and hopefully we can have you again. Hopefully we can have you again, and
Shit, bro.
and we need to connect. We also need to do something outside of here too.
Yeah,
You know,
man.
that'd be great. You know, go somewhere, do something. But I think God has put this in our hands, and we need to act on it, and that's what Activados is all about.
Yes,
you
sir.
know, so very, very happy that you're here, and I think this is one of our best episodes. It's a lot of stuff going on, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're having a great conversation, and that's what it's all about.
This is for people to know that this is real life.
This is real life.
With
Yeah.
no editing.
Break the
We're gonna
expectations.
put Zab's cutout right there.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. It's a picture of Zab right here this whole time in this camera right here.
And Zab says hi, by the way, everybody. No, but man, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
and when the thing is, man, let's be where we're at. We're gonna be a blessing. That's the end of the day. That's our goal.
Yes, sir.
And I hope this episode has been a blessing. If you want to share, comment. I know you're on social. Are you on social right now?
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
We're gonna put your handle. Is that okay?
That's fine.
They can reach out to you. They can reach out to you for counseling.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm gonna reach out to him.
Yeah. He's gonna charge you by the minute, bro.
Never mind.
Take you out to eat. No, pero
Limited edition, bro. Limited edition.
no, pero qué bueno. I'm glad we're here, and God bless everybody. And Activados.